The Morrison family's annual board meeting always felt more like a public execution than a business discussion. This year, I sat in my usual corner of the mahogany-lined conference room, watching my Uncle Marcus pace back and forth like a prosecutor preparing to deliver the death blow to my career. I straightened my blazer designer, though no one in my family would notice or care, and opened my laptop, pretending to review the quarterly reports I'd memorized weeks ago. Around me, the other board members filtered in, each carrying the weight of the Morrison name like a crown. Uncle Marcus stopped his pacing long enough to sneer in my direction. "Still insisting on attending these meetings, Emma? Don't you have some minor accounts to manage?" I smiled politely, remembering the documents hidden in my briefcase that would soon wipe that condescending look off his face. "Just doing my duty to the company, Uncle Marcus." He scoffed. 20 years as CEO of Morrison Industries had convinced him that the company was his personal kingdom, and everyone else, especially me, were merely servants to his reign. The tension in the room thickened as my cousin William strutted in, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. As head of operations, he'd spent the last 5 years systematically dismantling every project I'd built, claiming they were unnecessary drains on company resources. "Emma," he acknowledged with false warmth, "I didn't expect to see you here. Especially after the unfortunate performance of your division last quarter." I bit back a retort. The only reason my division's numbers appeared low was because William had deliberately redirected my biggest clients to his department, claiming they needed more experienced handling. My Aunt Victoria, head of finance and keeper of the family's purse strings, was the last to arrive. She'd never forgiven me for choosing to start in entry-level sales instead of accepting the cushy executive position she'd offered, one that would have kept me under her direct control. "Let's begin," Uncle Marcus announced, taking his place at the head of the table. "First order of business: departmental restructuring." I knew what was coming. I'd known for weeks, thanks to the network of loyal employees I'd built over the years, the same employees my family dismissed as irrelevant. "As you can see from these reports," William began, distributing folders with an air of false regret, "certain divisions have been consistently underperforming. We need to make some difficult decisions for the good of the company." My Aunt Victoria nodded solemnly. "The numbers don't lie. Emma's division has shown a 30% decline in revenue over the past quarter." Of course the numbers didn't lie. They'd been carefully manipulated to tell exactly the story my family wanted to hear. "Therefore," Uncle Marcus declared, fixing me with a look of practiced disappointment, "we'll be dissolving the smaller accounts division and redistributing its assets to more capable management." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to gauge my reaction. They expected tears, perhaps a passionate defense of my work, or maybe even begging. That's what had happened 10 years ago when they'd forced my father, their own brother, out of the company. Instead, I calmly opened my briefcase and removed a single document. "Before we vote on that," I said quietly, "I have something to add to the agenda." Uncle Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Emma, this decision isn't up for debate. The board has already Actually," I interrupted, my voice cutting through his like a blade, "according to company bylaws, any shareholder owning more than 20% of the company can add items to the meeting agenda. Wouldn't you agree, Uncle Marcus?" He frowned. "Well, yes, but that's hardly relevant since no individual shareholder owns 51%, I said, sliding the document across the table. "I own 51% of Morrison Industries." The silence that followed was absolute. William's face drained of color as he snatched up the paper, his hands shaking slightly as he read. This is impossible," he sputtered. "How could you possibly own controlling interest in the company?" I finished for him. "It's amazing what one can accomplish when nobody's paying attention." My Aunt Victoria grabbed the document next, her reading glasses quivering as she scanned the contents. "These shares, they're all registered to shell companies. Phoenix Holdings, Artemis Investments, Northern Star Capital. All of which," I said calmly, "are owned by me." Uncle Marcus slammed his fist on the table. "You're lying. We would have known if someone was buying up company shares." "Would you?" I asked, opening my laptop and turning it to face the room. "You were all so busy watching the big institutional investors, you never noticed the small, steady purchases happening right under your noses. 5% here, 3% there. Amazing how it adds up over 10 years. 10 years. William's voice cracked. You've been planning this for 10 years? Ever since you forced my father out, I confirmed. Did you really think I spent the last decade quietly accepting your abuse? That I was content running the small accounts you so graciously allowed me to keep? My Aunt Victoria's financial acumen finally kicked in. The declining revenue in your division, you were deliberately driving down the company's stock price. I nodded, allowing myself a small smile. Making it much more affordable to buy shares on the open market. Thank you for that, by the way. Your constant undermining of my work made the whole process much easier. You can't do this, Uncle Marcus growled, but his voice had lost its authority. The board won't stand for it. The board, I said, standing up, works for me now. And there are going to be some changes. I walked to the head of the table, each step measured and deliberate. Uncle Marcus remained frozen in his chair, 20 years of supremacy crumbling around him. First, I announced, William and Victoria, you're both suspended pending a full audit of your departments. I'm particularly interested in reviewing how client accounts were reassigned over the past 5 years. William's face went from pale to green. We both knew what the audit would reveal. You can't suspend us, he protested weakly. We're family. Family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Was I family when you sabotaged my projects? Was I family when you stole my clients? Was I family when you tried to force me out of the company my grandfather built? I turned to Uncle Marcus, who seemed to have aged a decade in the past few minutes. And you, Uncle? Do you remember what you said to my father the day you forced him out? This company needs strong leadership, not weak sentiment. Well, I couldn't agree more. The weight of my words hung in the air as I stood at the head of the table, my table now. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the faces of my stunned relatives. This meeting is adjourned, I declared. Except for you, Uncle Marcus. You and I need to discuss your retirement package. As the others filed out, looking shell-shocked and defeated, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. I saw my father in my stance, my grandfather in my jaw, and 10 years of careful planning in my eyes. But this wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice for my father, for the employees they'd mistreated, and for every small account they'd dismissed as worthless. And I was just getting started. The next morning, I arrived at Morrison Industries before dawn. The security guards, who had always treated me with more respect than my own family, nodded as I used my new executive elevator key. Good morning, Ms. Morrison, they said, no trace of surprise in their voices. Good people always know more than they let on. I walked into what had been Uncle Marcus's office, my office now, and ran my hand along the expensive mahogany desk. Family photos lined the walls. Uncle Marcus shaking hands with governors, Aunt Victoria at charity galas, William accepting business awards. Not a single picture of my father, their brother, whom they'd erased from the company's history. My assistant Michael knocked softly before entering. They're all waiting in the conference room, he said. And your uncle's lawyer has called 6 times already. I smiled. Let them wait. Michael, have maintenance take down those photos. I think it's time for some redecorating. The conference room fell silent as I entered. The usual board members were there, along with the heads of every major department. Uncle Marcus sat in his usual seat at the head of the table, apparently forgetting our conversation from yesterday. You're in my chair, Uncle Marcus, I said quietly. He flushed red but didn't move. This is ridiculous, Emma. I've spoken with the company's lawyers. There are ways to challenge this hostile takeover. Hostile. I raised an eyebrow, setting my briefcase down. I purchased shares legally on the open market. Nothing hostile about it. Now please move to one of the other seats. Don't make me call security on your first day as a regular board member. The scrape of his chair against the floor echoed through the room as he reluctantly moved. I took my place at the head of the table, opened my laptop and began. As of 9 o'clock this morning, there have been some organizational changes, I announced. William and Victoria Morrison are suspended pending investigation. Daniel Chun from our external audit firm will be conducting a complete review of all account transfers and financial decisions from the past 5 years. William jumped to his feet. You can't do this. I've run operations for Sit down, I cut him off. Unless you'd like me to start discussing the Anders account? Or perhaps the mysterious reassignment of the Blackwell portfolio. He sank back into his chair, the fight draining from his face. Furthermore, I continued, I've appointed new interim heads of operations and finance. Janet Pierce and Marcus Wong, please stand up. Two people rose, a middle-aged woman who'd been consistently overlooked for promotion despite her brilliant record, and a young man whose innovative proposals had been repeatedly shut down by William. But they're not family, Aunt Victoria protested weakly. Exactly, I replied. This company will now promote based on merit, not DNA. Speaking of which, I clicked to the next slide of my presentation, displaying a familiar face that made several board members gasp. I'd like to introduce our new chairman of the board, James Morrison. The door opened and my father walked in. He looked exactly as I remembered, though his hair had grown more silver. The room erupted in confused whispers. Hello, Marcus, my father said calmly to his brother. Victoria, William. It's been a while. Uncle Marcus shot to his feet. This is outrageous. James was voted out. Was forced out, I corrected. After you orchestrated a campaign to discredit him. We have proof of that too, by the way. Would you like to see the documents? My father took his seat near me and I continued the meeting. Over the next few weeks we'll be implementing several changes. First, we're reviving the small business division, expanding it to become a major focus of our operations. Those worthless small accounts you all dismissed? They represent an untapped market worth billions. I could see the realization dawning on their faces. All those small clients they'd mocked me for handling, all those minor accounts they deemed beneath them, I'd been building relationships, earning loyalty, creating a network that would now become one of the company's biggest assets. Additionally, I continued, we're implementing a new ethical oversight committee. Dad will be heading that up. I believe he has some interesting questions about certain decisions made over the past decade. The color drained from Uncle Marcus's face. We both knew what my father would find once he started digging. You'll destroy this company, William spat. You're throwing away 20 years of success. Success built on corruption, my father interjected quietly. Success built on betrayal. That's not the company my father, your grandfather, wanted to build. If anyone would like to resign rather than face the upcoming audits, I added, you have until the end of the day to submit your resignation. We'll provide generous severance packages in exchange for non-disclosure agreements. Aunt Victoria stood up slowly, her designer heels wobbling slightly. I'll have my resignation on your desk within the hour. She walked out without another word, her pride in tatters but her survival instincts intact. William wasn't as wise. This isn't over, he threatened, pointing at me. You have no idea how to run a company of this size. I opened a folder and slid some papers across to him. These are the true numbers from my division over the past 5 years. Not the manipulated reports you presented to the board, but the actual results. I've been running a company this size right under your nose. You were just too arrogant to notice. The meeting continued for another hour as I outlined the restructuring plans. One by one, the board members who had always ignored me began nodding along, seeing the vision I had for the company's future. Those who had been loyal to Uncle Marcus sat in stony silence, their careers crumbling before their eyes. After the meeting, my father lingered behind. We stood looking out the window at the city skyline, the same view he'd had before they forced him out. 10 years, he said softly. You spent 10 years planning this. I nodded. I learned from you, Dad. Patience, persistence, and keeping your eyes on the long game. I never wanted this for you, he sighed. The betrayal, the family politics. I know, I smiled. But I wanted it. Not just for revenge, but because I truly believe I can make this company better. Grandfather built something meaningful here before Uncle Marcus turned it into his personal kingdom. I want to restore that vision. He hugged me then and I felt the years of hurt and anger beginning to heal. A knock at the door interrupted us. Michael entered with a stack of papers. Ms. Morrison, the auditors have found something in William's records. You're going to want to see this. I took the papers, scanning them quickly. Well, I said, it seems Cousin William was even busier than we thought. Dad, how do you feel about joining me for another interesting board meeting tomorrow? Over the next few months, Morrison Industries underwent a transformation. The audit revealed years of financial manipulation, client poaching, and ethical violations. William faced criminal charges for embezzlement. Uncle Marcus, despite his threats of legal action, ultimately accepted early retirement rather than have his own misdeeds exposed. The small business division, now expanded and rebranded, became the company's fastest-growing segment. Janet and Marcus proved to be exceptional executives, bringing fresh perspectives and innovative ideas that had been suppressed under the old regime. 1 year after my takeover, I sat in my office reviewing the latest quarterly reports. The company's stock had doubled in value, employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and our client retention rate had never been better. A news alert popped up on my phone. William had accepted a plea deal. Uncle Marcus had been spotted in Florida, living in a modest condo paid for by his retirement package. Aunt Victoria had taken a consulting position with a smaller firm, her influence in the industry permanently diminished. My father knocked on my door holding 2 cups of coffee. Board meeting in 10 minutes. Ready to face the family? I smiled, thinking of the remaining board members, the ones who had survived the purge, who had proven themselves capable of adapting to the new Morrison Industries. You know what, Dad? They're not really family anymore. This company isn't about the Morrison name now. It's about the people who work here, the clients we serve, and the principles we uphold. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Your grandfather would be proud. The company they called worthless? I gestured to the framed stock certificate on my wall, the first share I'd ever purchased, the beginning of my decade-long quest. It was worth everything. Worth the wait, worth the struggle, worth every moment they underestimated me. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Now, let's go show them what a truly valuable company looks like. As we walked to the conference room, employees nodded respectfully, not because I was a Morrison but because I had earned their respect. The worthless cousin had built something priceless. A company where merit mattered more than names, where small accounts got the same attention as big ones, and where family ties were no longer chains used to bind and control. In the end, that was worth more than all the shares I owned.